Thank you to Ubisoft for providing me with this gaming content. So I just finished Assassin's Creed Claws of Awaji at 3 in the morning with bloodshot eyes and way too much coffee in my system. And honestly, I'm sitting here wondering if I'm having a heart attack or if I just played the same game or if Ubisoft listened to the feedback for once. And look, listen, I know half of you are thinking, great, another 10 hours of climbing towers, collecting feathers, while another half of you are desperately hoping that this DLC saves a game that you want to love. Well, I got some thoughts that might actually surprise you because this expansion does things that I genuinely didn't expect. And after spending my weekend completely absorbed in Hawaii Island, I can tell you whether it's worth your hard earned cash or if it's just another disappointment. I'm Andre here, and before we dive in, let me just say this. I went into this expansion with very low expectations. The main game was good, but kind of exhausting, like spending a weekend with a friend who plans every minute of your vacation last minute. It's fun, but very draining. So when Claws of Hawaii dropped, I figured it would be more of the same beautiful but bloated content that suffers from modern Assassin's Creed. But here's what we're covering today. The new bow staff combat that made me actually excited to get into the fights, whether Hawaii Islands feel different enough to justify existing, how the story handles Nawe's personal quest without drowning in political drama, and most importantly, if this 10-hour journey is worth interrupting your other gaming plans. I spent the entire weekend with this expansion, including way too much time trying to perfect the bow staff when I should have been doing laundry, admittedly. So you're getting the unfiltered truth here. So all right, let's get the bad news out of the way because this game genuinely annoyed me at first. You can't touch Claws of Hawaii until you completely finish the main story. And I mean every single thing. Both character arcs, all the personal quests, the whole 9 yards. I get it narratively, but seriously, come on. If you're anything like me who got burnt out around the 30-40 hour base game and never finished it, you're looking at some serious time investing into just seeing what the expansion has to offer. I actually had to go back and finish some side quests that I actually skipped because apparently I missed something super crucial. And let me tell you something, nothing kills enthusiasm for new content like being forced to complete your old homework first. It's like your mom telling you to go clean your room before you can actually play with your new toy. And technically is reasonable, but it's very frustrating nonetheless. With that being said, once I finally got access, I have to admit Hawaii Island immediately grabbed my attention. The opening sequence has this gorgeous moment where Nawe stands on the boat looking at the island for the first time, and there's this sense of discovering something genuinely unknown. Unlike the mainland where you're constantly bumping into historical figures, major events, Hawaii Island feels more mysterious and personal. The island itself hits that sweet spot between something feeling substantial but not overwhelming. You know how Valhalla's map made you want to cry looking at all the question marks? This feels more manageable while still giving you plenty to explore. The coastal areas especially look stunning, and there's something about the way the morning mist rolls over the cliffs that made me actually stop and appreciate the scenery instead of just rushing to the next objective. What I really appreciated was how different it feels from the main region. The base game areas all had their own personality, but they all were still clearly a part of the same war-torn Japan setting. Hawaii has this almost mythical quality, like you're stepping into a folktale rather than just a history book. And honestly, after dozens of hours dealing with political intrigue and clan warfare, this change of pace was desperately needed in my opinion. Let's talk about the star of the show, the bow staff. I'm not gonna lie, I was super skeptical at first because how many times have we seen in games add a new weapon that's just a reskin version of something we already had? But this thing actually changes how combat feels in a way that caught me off guard. I was not expecting that for a DLC. The dual stance system isn't just cosmetics fluff. High stance makes you feel like you're conducting a violent orchestra, sweeping through enemies with these wide flowing attacks. Low stance gets you up close and personal with quick, precise strikes that make you feel like you actually learn proper martial arts instead of just button smashing. The transitions between them is so smooth that I found myself switching stances mid-combo without even thinking about it. Here's the thing that really sold me on it. I actually started seeking out fights. In the base game, combat was something that just happened to me while I was just doing other stuff. With the bow staff, I literally was going out of my way to find enemies just to practice new combinations and kick ass. There's this one move where you sweep low and then immediately flip up the staff for an overhead strike that looks absolutely brutal and feels incredible to pull off. It was my favorite animation that they added. But there's a big but. It makes Yasuke's problem even worse. I already felt bad for the guy in the main game because Naoe was just more fun to play with, as in almost every situation. Now with the bow staff making her even more versatile in combat, switching to Yasuke just feels like a downgrade from a sports car to a pickup truck. And don't get me wrong, pickup trucks are great for their purpose, but when you want to have fun, you're not reaching the keys for a pickup truck. Let's just be honest. The animation work deserves special mention because you can actually tell someone on the team knows martial arts. These aren't just generic video game staff moves. They look authentic and each strike has real weight behind it. I spent way too much time in photo mode capturing mid-combat shots because the poses look that good. And here's a little secret. I may have spent an embarrassing amount of time in my living room trying to recreate some of these moves on a broomstick. Don't judge me, we've all been there. I'm an anime nerd, it's suspected. The narrative approach in Claws of Awaji honestly was a relief after the political maze of the main campaign. Instead of just juggling 17 different clan leaders whose name I kept forgetting, this expansion centers on something much more personal. Naoe trying to find answers about what happened to her mother. It's that kind of emotional hook that makes you actually care about the outcome instead of just going through the motions. What I loved about this setup is how it gives both characters clear motivation without drowning us in exposition. Naoe has her personal quest and Yasuke is there to support her, and the mystery unfolds naturally as you explore the island. No lengthy cutscenes explaining political ramifications of trading agreements between distant provinces, just good old-fashioned let's solve this mystery storytelling. The pacing here is much more measured than the base game. You're not immediately thrown into massive battles or complex schemes. Instead, you get time to naturally absorb the atmosphere and connect with local characters. There's this elderly fisherman early on who gives you information about strange happenings on the island, and he feels like an actual person with his own concerns rather than just a quest dispenser. I have to be honest though, the main villain is pretty forgettable. Without spoiling anything, they fall into that classic video game antagonist trap of just being evil for evil's sake. Their minions are actually more interesting, especially the one lieutenant that has a genuinely creepy dialogue that made my skin crawl in the best way possible. Sometimes supporting cast outshine the main threat, and that's definitely the case here. What the expansion nails is the relationship between Naoe and Yasuke in this new content. There are several missions where you just see them working together on screen and their banter feels natural rather than forced. There's a great moment where Yasuke makes a joke about Naoe's cooking that had me actually laughing out loud because it's a genuine friendship rather than just scripted dialogue. The incorporation of local folklore and spiritual element gives the story a different flavor from the historical drama of the base game. Hawaii Island has more of its own legends and custom that feels specific to the place rather than just generic ancient Japanese mysticism. It's like the difference between visiting a museum and hearing stories from your grandmother. Both can be interesting, but one feels alive and personal. Here's where things get a little bit complicated though, because the mission design in Claws of Awaji is generally improved in some areas while stubbornly clinging to the old problems of the others. The best missions in this expansion are the ones that embrace what makes Assassin's Creed unique. There's this incredible infiltration sequence about halfway through where you have to get to a heavily guarded compound using pure stealth and environmental puzzles. Multiple paths, genuine choice in how you approach the objective, and the bow staff gives you new options when things go sideways. I replayed this mission 3 times just to try different approaches, which is something I rarely do in Assassin's Creed games. But then you got these missions that feel like they were designed by a committee using the Ubisoft open world checklist. Clear this outpost, collect these 3 items scattered across the map, eliminate targets in specific order while they conveniently wait around for you. It's functional but uninspired, and it wastes the potential of this beautiful new setting. The travel pacing is still an issue, though less severe than the base game. There's this one quest chain where you literally have to ride back and forth across the island 4 times, and I started wondering, did someone get paid per mile of horseback riding that they can force into this game? Like seriously, who came up with that mission? I get that they want you to see the scenery, but there are more engaging ways to showcase an environment than just mandatory sightseeing tours. However, the expansion does introduce some generally cool new concepts. The bow staff technique trials are basically combat puzzles that teach you advanced techniques while actually being fun to complete. These aren't just kill X enemies with Y weapon challenges. They actually require some specific timing, positioning, and strategy. I actually got stuck on the third trial for like an hour because I was too proud to look up the solution. But when I finally nailed it, the satisfaction was real. The cinematic mission at Supernova Castle is where everything comes together beautifully. It requires both characters, incorporates environmental hazards, and the multiple phases that keeps escalating the stakes. This is the type of ambitious mission design that makes you remember why you fell in love with the series in the first place. It makes me wish more of the expansion hit this level of creativity. One thing that cracked me up in the DLC is how they tried to address the why NPCs don't react to my obvious weapons problem by having guards occasionally comment on Naoe's bow staff. A small detail, but it made me smile the first time a guard said something like, "That's an unusual weapon choice." Progress is progress, I guess, but it still made me smile. The technical implementation of Claws of Awaji presents an interesting case study in how DLC development can both benefit from and be constrained by foundation established in the base game. On the positive side, the expansion runs on the same technical framework as Assassin's Creed Shadows, which means it benefits from any performance optimization and stability improvements that have been applied since the game's launch. Visually, Awaji Island showcases some impressive environmental design that feels distinct from mainland Japanese regions. The coastal areas feature dynamic weather systems and lighting effects that create particularly striking moments during sunrise and sunset sequences. The water rendering and coastal cliff formation demonstrate strong technical artistry, and there are several vista points throughout the island that provides generally breathtaking views. However, the expansion isn't immune to some of the technical issues that persist in Assassin's Creed Shadows. Frame rate inconsistencies still occur, particularly during complex combat encounters with multiple enemies and environmental effects. These performance dips are most noticeable on console platforms, though PC players with higher end hardware can generally maintain more stable performance through graphic settings and adjustments. Loadout times between different areas of Awaji Island are generally reasonable, though there are some occasional hitches when transitioning between interior and exterior environments. The expansion does benefit from the same fast travel system as the base game, which helps mitigate some of those travel pacing issues I mentioned earlier. One technical aspect that deserves particular praise is the audio design throughout Claws of Awaji. The expansion features a distinct musical score that incorporates traditional Japanese instruments in a way that feels authentic rather than just stereotypical. The ambient sound designs of Awaji Island creates a strong sense of place with coastal sounds, forest ambience, and weather effects that enhance the immersive qualities of exploration. Character animation quality remains high throughout the expansion, particularly for the new bow staff technique and enhanced interactions sequence between Naoe and Yasuke. The facial animations and voice acting maintain the standards established in the base game, though some secondary characters on Awaji Island feel less polished than the main protagonist. When evaluating Claws of Awaji as content proposition, the value equation becomes somewhat complex depending on your relationship with the base Assassin's Creed Shadow experience. The expansion provides approximately 10 hours of content if you focus primarily on the main story path, though completionist players will find considerably more time investment through optional objectives, exploration, and skill development. The expansion introduces new gear, weapons, and abilities for both Naoe and Yasuke that can be carried back into the main world. This creates an interesting dynamic where Claws of Awaji content enhances your experience with the base game retroactively. Players who return to the mainland Japan after completing the expansion will have access to new combat techniques, equipment options, and transversal abilities that aren't available during their initial game playthrough. From a replayability standpoint, the expansion offers more meaningful replay incentives than many DLC releases. The bow staff technique trials can be revisited with improved skills and equipment, creating opportunities for better performance and completion times. Several story missions, including branching paths and alternative approaches that reward multiple playthroughs with different tactical choices. However, the replayability factor is somewhat limited by the same open world fatigue issues that affected parts of the main Assassin's Creed Shadow campaign. While Awaji Island includes numerous side activities, exploration objectives, and collectible items, many of these feel familiar to the content from the base game rather than offering genuinely new types of challenges or discoveries. The pricing structure for Claws of Awaji creates an interesting value proposition. Players who pre-ordered any edition of Assassin's Creed Shadow received the expansion at no additional cost, what makes it an obvious recommendation for that audience. For players purchasing the expansion separately, the value equation depends heavily on how much you enjoyed the base game's core mechanics and whether the promise of redefined mission design and new combat options justified the additional investment. One aspect that adds significant value is how the expansion content integrates with the broader Assassin's Creed Shadow progression systems. New abilities, weapons, and gear obtained in Claws of Awaji becomes permanent additions to your character's loadout. The expansion also includes photo mode enhancements and new customization options that extends the creative tools available for capturing and sharing gameplay moments. While this might seem like a minor addition, the stunning visual designs of Awaji Island makes these tools particularly valuable for players who enjoy the documentation and the sharing aspects of open world exploration. Evaluating Claws of Awaji within the broader context of Assassin's Creed Shadows and the franchise as a whole reveals both the expansion's strengths and the ongoing challenges facing the series. In many ways, this DLC represents a refinement of the base game's ideas rather than a fundamental reimagining, which will either be exactly what you're looking for or a source of disappointment depending on your perspective on the main campaign. Compared to the base Assassin's Creed Shadow experience, Claws of Awaji benefits significantly from its more focused scope and cleaner narrative objectives. The main game sometimes struggled under the weight of its ambitious dual protagonist system and complex historical drop. The expansion, by contrast, has a much more defined sense of purpose and direction that makes individual missions feel more cohesive and compact. The combat improvements introduced through the bow staff system represents a genuine evolution rather than a simple addition. While the base game combat was functional, it often felt like a slightly updated version of the systems that we've seen in previous Assassin's Creed entries. The bow staff introduces tactical depth and decision making that feels more engaging and strategic much than the base game combat encounters. However, the expansion doesn't address some of the fundamental structure issues that affected Assassin's Creed Shadows. The open world design philosophy still relies heavily on familiar Ubisoft formulas, map icons, collecting hunting, and repetitive side activities that feels more like a checkbox completion than organic exploration. Players who bounced off the base game due to open world fatigue may find similar issues in Claws of Awaji, despite the more focused narrative structure. While compared to other recent Assassin's Creed expansions, Claws of Awaji sits somewhere in the middle tier of quality and ambition. It's much more substantial and polished than some of the other smaller DLC releases we've seen in some recent entries, but it doesn't reach the level of transformative expansion content like some of the larger DLC expansions from early games in the series. Mission pacing is generally improved, character interactions feel more natural and meaningful, and the new gameplay mechanics are better integrated to the core experience rather than feeling superficial additions. These improvements suggest that the development team has been actively responding to community feedback and integrating on the formula. One area where Claws of Awaji particularly succeeds compared to the base game is the environmental storytelling and world building. Awaji Island feels much more cohesive and purposeful as in a location than some of the large regions in the main game. Every area of the island feels like it has its own specific reason for existing within the narrative content, rather than just simply providing variety for its own sake. The expansion also handles the dual protagonist system more effectively than much of the base game. Rather than just simply switching between Naoe and Yasuke for different types of missions, Claws of Awaji includes more of a scenario where both characters are present and working together, which helps justify the narrative device and creates more interesting storytelling opportunities. Claws of Awaji arrives at an interesting moment in the gaming industry, particularly for the large-scale open-world action games and DLC content strategies. The expansion represents both traditional approaches to post-launch content and some attempts at addressing evolving player expectations around value and innovation in downloadable expansions. From a technical standpoint, the expansion demonstrates how modern DLC development can leverage existing game frameworks while introducing meaningful new mechanics. The bow staff system required a significant new animation work, combat programming, and UI integration, but it builds upon the existing combat foundation rather than requiring completely separate systems. This approach allows for more sophisticated additions while maintaining reasonable development timelines and costs. From a competitive landscape perspective, Claws of Awaji faces comparisons not just from other Assassin's Creed content, from other expansion releases from other major open world franchises. Recent expansions for games like The Witcher 3, Horizon Zero Dawn and Ghost of Tsushima has set the standards for substantial post-launch content that feels meaningful and different from the base game experiences. Claws of Awaji delivers solid content with familiar parameters, but it doesn't necessarily push boundaries in a way that separates it from other broader market. After all this time with Claws of Awaji, here's my honest take. The expansion is really good at being more of what Assassin's Creed already was, with some genuine improvement that makes it worth experiencing. But if you're hoping for something that completely transforms your opinion on the base game, you're probably going to be disappointed. For some of you who enjoyed the main campaign, this expansion delivers exactly what you want: better mission design, a fantastic new combat system, gorgeous environments, and a more focused story that doesn't get lost in political lore. The bow staff alone makes returning to this world worthwhile, especially if you're a Nioh player like myself. But here's the reality check. If you bounced off Assassin's Creed Shadows because the open world fatigue, repetitive content, or pacing issues, Claws of Awaji improves these problems without completely solving them. It's a refinement but not a revolution, which means your fundamental relationship with the game probably won't change dramatically. If you got this expansion as part of your original purchase, it's no-brainer. The content quality justifies the time investment, and new mechanics enhances both the expansion and the base game when you go back to the mainland. For separate buyers, ask yourself this: did you finish the base game wanting more, or did you finish it just feeling relieved that it was over with? From a technical standpoint, the expansion is a solid with gorgeous visual moments, though it inherits the performance quirks of the base game. Don't expect miracles, but don't expect major problems either. The integration with the existing system is seamless, and the new content feels like a natural extension rather than just something bolted afterwards. My recommendation is pretty simple. If you loved Assassin's Creed Shadows and you've been craving a return to feudal Japan with some fresh mechanics and a more intimate story, Claws of Awaji delivers the experience with a quality and polish. If you're on the fence about this series or hoping this expansion will fix fundamental issues that you had with the formula, maybe you should wait for a sale or check some gameplay footage out first. Honestly, the fact that I stayed up until 3 a.m. in the morning to finish this probably tells you something you need to know about my opinion. When a game can keep me engaged past my normal bedtime despite knowing I have work in the next day, it's doing something right. Just maybe keep some coffee on hand if you're planning to binge it like I did. So that's my complete honest breakdown of Assassin's Creed Shadows Claws of Awaji. This expansion delivers meaningful moments and improvements wrapped up in a more focused package that respects your time better than the base game did. The bow staff combat system is legitimately fantastic. Awaji Island is beautiful and atmospheric, and the personal story approach feels refreshing after the political complexity of the main campaign. Whether you should spend your money on this ultimately comes down to your experience with the base game. I'm genuinely curious about your guys' experience that you have with the expansion. Have you had a chance to master the bow staff system? What did you think of the intimate storytelling approach? And did any of you spend way too much time trying to recreate those bow staff moves like I did, or am I just weird? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I actually read them every single day, and I love hearing your different perspectives. If you want to see me play through these expansions in real time, catch me on Twitch. Link is in the bio. And until next time, for more in-depth reviews or countdowns, please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, guys, stay safe, stay smart, and stay awesome.